All right. Hello, everybody. We're going to be in this video lecture talking about the Holocaust. Now, I know we already kind of briefly talked about it a little bit um, in the last lesson with the liberation of the camps. I showed you guys some scenes from Band of Brothers. I do want to go into it. Originally in class, if we're going to be meeting as a class, I was going to show you guys Schindler's List. I highly, highly, highly encourage you guys while you're home, and if you're bored, I'm sure many of you guys probably are. If you could find access to watch Schindler's List, it's a long movie, three and a half hours, but the movie does an excellent job of showcasing from beginning to end, how the Germans went to great lengths into organizing this. It took many years for them to organize it, and eventually will lead to the final solution that we'll get to here in the slides. So again, if you're bored, watch Schindler's List. I was gonna show you guys that anyway. So if you have time, I'm sure it's on Netflix or Hulu or somewhere. You could probably try to find it. So please do if you can. All right, so. Kind of going through this, obviously there's no secret. Some vocabulary terms you're going to need to know and be responsible for, especially on your World War II websites. The idea of anti-Semitism. Now, this was not a new phenomenon. This was not a new thing that just happened when Hitler came to power. Jews all across Europe experienced forms of racism for centuries, long time. They have a history of being persecuted, arrested, and especially too amongst like the Christians, Catholics too. Basically, the Christians saw them as competition, and Catholics began to downplay, the Jewish religion as well as their ancestry. So this has been going on for a very long time, and a lot of it, Russia has a history of it. Germany obviously has a long history of it. So this wasn't, some new thing. But Hitler is gonna, in order to, rise up to power, he's gonna capitalize on a lot of this anti-Semitic feelings that people are gonna have. Again, it wasn't just him, but there were other people, too, that were very influential that were also blaming Jews for a lot of things. You gotta remember, after World War One, Germany was humiliated after losing the war. They had to pay all the war reparations. They would take blame for the war, for causing the war, reducing territory, reducing army. So Hitler is going to he's going to say that the Jews stabbed them in the back, that stabbed the country in the back, and blame Jews. A lot of it's unfair, but again, he capitalized on the anti-Semitic feelings that a lot of Germans have, and they blame them for losing the war. And this was something that a lot of Germans were able to rally around. When times are going rough and you're in a tough spot, it's always easier to blame somebody else. And Jews were always, Hitler, would always bash the Jews as being communists, which was far from the truth. Again, most Germans hated communism, but he linked them up with communists, and there were very few Jewish people who were communists. So after World War One, you're going to start seeing some more cases, especially when Hitler comes to power in the 30s. Jews will be denied the freedoms. He'll encourage Germans to ban or boycott Jewish businesses, and eventually they'll have something called the Nuremberg Laws, where he'll force Jews to wear the Star of David patch on their arm to identify them. Now, notice when we get into our genocide unit, it's very common in countries that have been responsible for acts of genocide, is that you always want to identify the enemy by making them wear something. In Cambodia, for instance, Pol Pot made them wear scarves. In Rwanda, you had cards. You had ID cards that were given out to the minority group. In this case, you're making Jews wear the Star of David. So this is a pretty common thing that you see in countries that have experienced acts of genocide. So anyway, I did want to go into that in terms of the history of it. Wasn't some new thing. Hitler's going to use this to really garner his following, and a lot of it was based on pure racial theories as well. As we talked about, Hitler wanted the Aryan race. He believed that they were the most superior race, and he believed in order to build a strong Germany, that you needed to vet out, get rid of the impure Germans, and he believed the Jews, the Slovaks, the disabled, mentally crippled. He believed that those were the inferior groups of people that needed to be getting rid of in order to make Germany rise to prominence again. All right, so you see this, all throughout Germany in the 30s, encouraging Germans to buy only German goods, buy from German shops. Again, really isolating those minority groups, really encouraging, German, buy German stuff. You had segregation occurring as well, very similar to what life was like in the South, in the United States. You had streetcars were segregated Jews, and you had the pure Germans. So keeping the races separated, or very similar to kind of what you saw here with white populations and African Americans, especially in the southern states. All right, now one night in the 1930s, they call it the Night of Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass. This was November 9th and 10th. I believe it was 1935, I believe. I'm drawing a blank on the exact year, but somewhere in the mid-30s. There was a burning synagogue in Germany. And the Nazis are going to institute basically martial law, where they're going to institute a policy of just massacring Jewish synagogues. Over 200 Jewish synagogues are going to be burned down, where German citizens go around to synagogues all across Germany, burn them down, causing violence towards Jews. And then 30,000 Jews will be rounded up and sent into concentration camps all on this night. So they call it Night of the Broken Glass, over really a 2-day period that was severe violence towards Jews all across Germany. Here's just a picture showing you guys one of the synagogues that were burned down in Poland. All right, so think back to what we talked about before, the idea of Lebensraum. Hitler wanted to create living space for Germans throughout Germany and throughout his territories. So the start of concentration camps started with this, that he forced Jews from their homes. The idea that he wanted to keep track of all the Jews all across Germany, all across Poland. So he made them register. And he gave them a certain period of time where they had to leave their homes. And they went all throughout Jewish communities, all throughout Germany, all throughout Poland, and forced them to move from their homes and forced them to move into city blocks all across Germany, where different cities were set up. 16 blocks were fenced off, roped off, all throughout Germany. And all the Jews would move into these ghettos, as they would call them. Oftentimes in these, you'd have no privacy. You were forced to live in apartments with other families. They were usually established in poor sections of the cities. Again, as I said, as you see here, there's barbed wire walls around these ghettos to force them in, keep track of them, keep them all in one spot. These areas were overcrowded. Because again, when you're packing tens of thousands of people into a 16-block radius, you're packing as many people as you possibly can. It became overcrowding. They put them to work with labor. Wasn't enough food to go around, and Jews will be murdered in there. But you see there, so chopping up furniture to use fuel. So you see this, the German Nazis would begin to loot a lot of the Jewish homes and take their belongings. So that starts there. So here's some forced to relocate to Krakow ghetto. Jews remove their belongings. A child working in a ghetto workshop wearing a Star of David. So you see some of the patch. All right, so a big idea, I already talked about this and I already alluded to it, but to control a country completely, you have to control what people think. So freedom of speech, freedom of religion are going to be controlled. Using propaganda to really brainwash people. The Nazis found books to be dangerous, so they encouraged thinking. So that's why, the idea of having things censored. What should the people know, and controlling what they know is important in these types of governments. All right, so by late 1941, at this point, World War II already started. So they have Poland, they have France. At this point, was already defeated. Belgium, most of Europe at this point was already under Nazi rule. So now, again, as I said, they've moved all the Jews into these ghettos all throughout Poland, all throughout Germany, and they began to build the concentration camps as they were in these ghettos. So in Poland, Czechoslovakia, Lithuania, Latvia, Ukraine, Western Russia, where they first used as slaves and then they were murdered. So this is some pictures of people that are locked in a building and were burned alive. Again, this begins the process. So you see this map. Again, all these extermination camps you see right here on the map that were set up, again, in Germany and then Poland, eastern part of Russia as well. These smaller black dots were just other camps that were used before to store people before the concentration camps were done, or as like a slave labor, essentially, to put them to work. All right, so the modes of killing. The first years of the war, the gas chambers of the later Nazi concentration camps were not yet common, so gas chambers weren't used until later on in the process. For the most part, it was firing squad was used. Most victims were taken in groups to secluded areas, were stripped of their clothes, pushed in open pits, and then were gunned down. So this is the idea of like mass graves, putting them in the pits, shoot them all, they're already buried in the mass grave. So that was the most common form. Now the final solution. This was in January of 42. A group of Nazi officials will meet in a villa outside of Berlin, and they'll hammer out their details for the so-called Jewish question. The meeting set a secret goal to remove 11 million Jews from Europe by whatever means that they have to. So essentially, the final solution would end in the deaths of over 6 million Jews, gypsies, homosexuals, and people with handicaps. So this was the process to exterminate them. That was the final solution. So that's where the killings will amp up after this, of 42. So by 1942, the number of Jews became more and more organized, and Hitler encouraged his officers to speed up the process. The first extermination camp began in 1942, although prisoners died by the thousands from disease, overwork, starvation. But again, killing was done before this. This is where it really starts to amp up in their processes. So here's a barrack at Auschwitz, one of the most, I guess most famous concentration camp that was set up. Most of the killing occurred. See the barbed wire on the camp. This is where they were housed in barracks. This picture here is like the Nazis kept bags of hair. Why? If you burn the bodies, you remove all the hair. It's the stench. When you burn, if you ever smelled burning hair, it smells awful. So they would shave the Jews to eliminate that stench and odor. There's rings that were collected from prisoners. They would use meltdown for gold to make money, to fuel the Nazi, to provide them more money. So you see here some basically mass graves, bodies all over the place. So you guys saw this in the video that I posted in the last post. Once the Allies started to liberate these camps, they forced citizens in these areas to come and help bury them as basically a form of punishment. Like, a lot of these people knew what was going on. They were hiding what was going on. And in some cases, they even informed the Nazis, hey, the Allies are getting close, leave. So they, a lot of them had a hand in allowing this to occur. So as a punishment, Allies made them come here and basically see what they allowed to have happen and help bury the bodies. All right, so you guys are going to have an ed puzzle to complete. Don't forget to keep up to date with your World War II websites. The Holocaust, Battle of Bulge, all these things will all be a part of it. So make sure that you're working on that. I'm gonna start kind of laying off the work a little bit, but make sure you guys are working on that and completing it. Use Google to help you. I know we're missing class. I understand that, but you could use that and look up some things too to add into your projects. All right, have a good one.